Hello and welcome everyone, I'm the Rambling Director, and today we're going to be talking about Death on the Nile. So I've got to say that one of the things that Kenneth Branagh is one of my favorite directors. I don't know if I've talked about that yet. I think he's probably my favorite director working. He's like the modern day Orson Welles. There's just something about him. He's not only a brilliant actor, but he has this vision for everything that he makes. And one of the things I was telling my girlfriend as we were watching, or as we were coming out, she loves Kenneth Branagh too. And one of the things that I mentioned to her is, you know what is amazing about him? Is that every film he makes, whether it's a charming but flawed film, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or even his production of Love's Labour's Lost, which I love that film, but it does have whiskers. You know, it has little whiskers that maybe keep it from being the best film ever made, but there's just something fantastic about it. And no matter what the movie is, he always makes it feel epic. He can take the smallest story and unfold it into something truly just so epically fun and cool. And the first film in this series, his Hercule Poirot series, is Murder on the Orient Express. And I thought it was amazing how he took a book that in some ways is written to be claustrophobic. It basically takes place in just a couple rooms. They're all stuck on a train, and he opens that up. Well, now they're not stuck inside the train anymore. Now it's, they're buried in snow on one side and, a sheer cliffside on the other. But we can still go out and walk around in the snow and get this beautiful, massive mountainside and, this gorgeous train set, digitally extended, of course, but there is some of it that is really there. And actually, now we're going to move into this massive tunnel and, create a vista shot of this beautiful background. He just makes everything look beautiful. And I thought one of the coolest things about this that this film made me realize is he needs to shoot some documentaries, because I've never seen Egypt look so epic. And I mean, I've watched plenty of documentaries where they've shown these sites in Egypt, but I've never seen anybody make them look so cool and so beautiful. And he made these sites look gorgeous. So, just something to think about. Getting into the actual movie itself, I love the Hercule Poirot series, but it has been a while since I read this book, and I actually restarted it hoping I'd finish it in time to talk about the film, but I didn't. So what I will say is, from my memory, having read it only a couple years ago, I did notice that there were a couple things they changed that were massive changes, and one of them was replacing one of the characters with Book from Murder on the Orient Express and his mother, and creating a romance with him and Rosalie that is based a lot on the aristocratic or Edwardian aristocratic ideas mixed together with some ideas about race and some other interesting additions that I thought were very welcome. Something else that I thought was brilliant about the movie is the addition of a reason behind why Poirot has his big, fancy, beautiful mustache, which of course is iconic of his character. And I thought the illustration of that idea, it's a prologue to the movie, and it's just fantastic to see what they have done with that. This cast is so good, and just looking at the names, you would imagine it was good. The one thing that I thought was a little bit odd was that Russell Brand is in there, but all of his screen time put together probably takes up 5 minutes. I really expected his character to be a little bit more memorable, but as it turns out, they underplay him so that I think the idea was they were underplaying him so that there was more of a red herring. So if you didn't know who the killer was, you wouldn't guess immediately. They had to create more suspense in that. If I said one other thing that was a little bit, it's the Kenneth Branagh charm, because in other movies, when Book is talking to Poirot, and he goes, yes, that person over there, she's interested in her for her money. That person over there, oh, she's the maid. She's been with her for a while, but she's a communist, you know. And that doctor, well, he was engaged to her for a little while, so who knows where that's going. It's like maybe a 2-minute bit where Book is just basically reading their character summaries to Poirot. And again, in another movie, and maybe if I was being a little bit more objective, maybe if I wasn't just outright saying, listen, I'm a Kenneth Branagh fanboy, take it with a grain of salt, maybe I would be like, well, you know, they could have found a better way to do that exposition. And you know what? To be fair, they probably could have. But there's something kind of charming about this sort of old school sensibility to it, where a movie's just not afraid to say, yeah, we're doing this, guys. We're a whodunit movie, and we're just going to come out and tell you, here's your character roster of people that you need to be looking out for, and here's their motivations. It's a little bit like the movie Clue in that sense, actually. Except, obviously, serious. I loved the additions that he makes to Poirot's character. I thought making him personally connected to the case in Murder on the Orient Express, which he was not in the book. And then in this film, they do something similar, but what they do that I thought was just brilliant, and in terms of, if you're going to make an adaptation, you have to do something that the other adaptations didn't do. And one of the things I thought was great about this was they just took the idea, the concept. What if all these people were all in love? Everybody on the ship this time is doing something entirely for love, including Poirot. And let's talk about his Catherine. I don't speak French, but I just love the way he says that. I love that they take that idea and they say, all of these people, their motivation is love. In some way, shape, or form, their motivation for what they're doing and why they're doing is love, in some sense. So let's explore all the different angles of love that we can through these characters. Book's mother at one point even says, Corinthians had it all wrong. Love is impatient. Love is cruel. Love certainly fails. And so you see the side of jaded old love. We see a twist that I cannot spoil, between the maid and I can't think of her name, but the communist woman who gives up all of her wealth. Just anything Kenneth Branagh makes is typically just beautiful to look at. So on a filmmaking level, I can only give 1 point against it, and that's that one shot of the Karnak, the ship. It was an overhead shot looking at the funnel, and it looked pretty rubbery, like, in terms of its CG, but the rest of the CG in the film all looks fantastic. I really can't think of 2 shots that were like that. It was just that one, and I feel like maybe they just missed that shot in the editing, because if you cut it out, nothing would have been missed. It should have been left on the cutting room floor. Were there a few flaws here and there? Maybe, but nothing I can say in terms of filmmaking. In a lot of reviews, they forget that. They forget to mention the filmmaking. You know, the reason we're here. The cinematography is gorgeous. He has, the whole set is decorated. It reminds me of his set for his film of Hamlet, where the whole set is decorated with these beautiful windows that have these kind of angles to them. And he constantly is shooting through the window into the lobby. And because of that, it causes the people to phase in and out as the windows go by. I can't quite explain it, but it's reflective and it's beautiful. And everybody, sometimes there's shots where people are showing up 3 or 4 times reflected. And it's just gorgeous to look at. You cannot overstate how rare it is. And somebody who comes from a Shakespearean background can obviously, I think, pull that off a little bit better than a lot of people. The idea of taking something that's incredibly dialogue heavy and making it cinematic. Who can do that? Tarantino? Nolan can do it. Okay. He doesn't always succeed at that. There's a lot of talking in his movies. But, it's rare that you find that quality in today's world. You don't have a lot of Orson Welles in the world now. You don't have a lot of Alfred Hitchcocks in the world who can take a movie like Rear Window that's very dialogue heavy and make it truly cinematic. You don't have a lot of that. So when it happens, you've got to take a step back and say whatever issues you had with the script, leave it aside for a moment, because the filmmaking is just so beautiful. And again, so many reviewers, I watch so many reviews where they're just fretting over the script, and it's like, guys, you want to just take a moment to recognize that this was a beautiful film to look at, that it visually illustrated things. There's a scene where Poirot is sitting with the murderer, and because I knew the ending, I was like, ooh, are we setting up? Is this going to be like he's talking to this person, but he's going to twist it around? No, actually, it was just purely there for foreshadowing. That's pretty cool. I just can't fault a movie with a few bad lines. There are a few bad lines. It's entirely a scripting issue. And even then, this movie is so drenched in its own sensibility. It's like one of his Shakespeare movies, when somebody turns and talks to the camera for a minute and then never does it again for the rest of the movie. It's part of the package of a whodunit film based in the 20s or 30s. There's going to be some lines that are a little bit cheesy, for lack of a better word. But when a movie can embrace the cheese of those small moments and say for the rest of the film, look at this, we are giving you a grade A product, guys. I liked some of the quirkiness, some of the funny, the humor to Kenneth Branagh's movies are always very good. He adds in a lot of really good humor. Even in Hamlet, he added in some good humor, like taking the line, "for well you know," and saying it for, well, little things like that. And one of the things that I thought was really quite funny was a moment where two characters just leave to have sex. And it's set up for a moment. It's not just out of nowhere. It is actually setting up for something that's about to happen. But it's entirely in keeping with both of their characters. And it's so quirky. And they're role-playing, like being Cleopatra or some crap like that. It's so weird. And me and my girlfriend is a bookaholic, and she just read the book. And I was like, that is not how this scene went in the book. And she was like, oh no, it is not. Another thing that I can point out is there's just an incredibly visceral sexual dance going on in the beginning. And it's obviously choreographed, but there's something about the nature of how they pull that off that is very, very intense and, yeah, even erotic. And they do such a great job of showing these three characters' dynamics, and Poirot watching all of it and taking it in. And my girlfriend leans over to me and she goes, we need to go dancing more. So I thought that was pretty funny, and I wanted to share that. But also the moment of seeing this through Poirot's eyes is just exquisitely done. There's not as much focus on him trying to keep balance, but there is a lot more little bits and bobs of him trying to maintain order, even if it's just in the number of desserts on his plate. I really liked the addition of Book back into the story. That was a very nice touch, and the way they introduce him flying a kite on top of one of the pyramids. And why are you doing this, Book? Because no one ever has. 4,000 years, and no one's ever flown a kite on the pyramids until today. That has such a sensibility of an 1800s novel. It's sort of like dialogue you would hear in a Jules Verne novel. The sort of, well, why would you do this? Because no one ever has, and I am here to do it. That's the sort of thing that you would just hear in one of those older books, and I love that. Same with Gal Gadot's character being introduced in one scene wearing this huge gold robe, and a Nefertiti or Cleopatra sort of, Nefertiti had the big hair, but Cleopatra, I guess, sort of wig and all these jewelry, and her husband is like, how could I deny the Queen of the Nile? And everybody comes out and sees her beautifully silhouetted, and it's such an over-the-top moment, and the audience all goes, whoa, ha, ha, ha. You know, in the movie, the audience does. And I was in an empty theater, but, you know, it's such a cute little moment where you're like, yeah, no other film made in this day and time would do something like that. So I just have to respect the risk of saying, this moment could look goofy, but we're gonna do it anyway. And it didn't look goofy, to be fair. It just looked so strange that you just have to respect it. He actually did something similar with Hamlet, where when he's being carried away at the end, his arms are hanging out very dramatically, and when it cuts to an overhead shot of him, he looks like a corpus, the corpus of Jesus on the cross. And you know what? It is just on the cusp of being over-the-top ridiculous. And something about the way he films it, something about the way he performs it with his piercing blue eyes staring straight into the camera, you just can't help but admire it, and it works. And then you're like, why did that work when so many other films would have done that and it would have been stupid? And it's just the power of Kenneth Branagh. Well, that and great cinematography and brilliant scripting. And when a movie is brilliant up until a point, you just accept when it does something kind of weird. And it just kind of makes you smile. It's almost like when you have an old friend who you love and they do something kind of strange and you're like, you know what? Anybody else I would have slapped for that, but there's something strangely beautiful when you do it. There is just a plethora of really great ideas and great things going on in this movie. It's also daring in another sense. The first third to a half of the movie, like a good hour in, before the murder happens, it's all set up. But, to be fair, there is mysteries going along with this, and suspense being built up along the way. So it's not boring. But gosh, what a risk. I mean, if I was adapting this, I would have the murder take place at the end of the first act, about a third of the way through the film. But Kenneth Branagh, apparently, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I wildly miscalculated, but it seemed to me like we were a good hour into the film before the murder happens. There's a theatricality to his productions. Even Thor has a theatricality to it, and the actors behave a little bit more, not over the top, but more theatrical. They behave a little bit more like they're on stage than in a movie. And I've always admired that because I love old school acting. Jim Cagney is one of my favorite actors. So, Jimmy Stewart too. Orson Welles. These people had a bigger way of filling the screen. They didn't just... I talk about this a lot, but I hate it when modern actors do this little number. They're like, if I get really close and I whisper my lines, and I hold my eyes open for a really long time until tears form, then you'll believe I am an actor. I just don't believe that as much as I believe the idea of when somebody's angry, that they're gonna shout, and they're gonna be angry, I just believe that. I just buy that more, and so I tend to direct my actors more like that. But I came from a theater background too, so, take it with a grain of salt. Anyway, you know what? I'm rambling now, so it's time to end it. I would give this film an A+. And if I was being objective about it, taking aside the fact that I love Kenneth Branagh's movies, I go to see all of his films, I would probably still give it an A. I can separate myself from my emotions. I would still give it an A. There were a couple things that brought it down, a couple lines that were a little too far. I thought Rosalie, barking at Poirot for something that he did was a little bit over scripted. It was just a little too far, and I actually thought it would have been better if she had been very accepting of him in that moment. It actually would have made her less of a suspect, and in doing so made her suspicion go more towards her. But they're just little things, and yeah, definitely an A movie if you like whodunit style films. If you don't like mystery films, if you don't like suspense films, if you don't like slow burns, that's important. This is a slow burning film, and if you don't like slow burns, you will not like this movie. So just go into it knowing that. You're not going to like it. But if you do like those things, check it out. It's a brilliant film. Thank you everybody for watching. I'm the Rambling Director. You have a great day.